Hey there, greetings everybody, and welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So I'm here, December 1st, starting a new series. This is one that Ben has put together. Did a lot of work on this, I might add. He picked all 32 bands, put them in their first round battles, and he did this all fairly quickly, so I had lots of time to listen to some of this stuff and develop an opinion about some of these albums. Anyways, the title of this series will be called Solo Artist Album Battles, or Album Wars. I think it'll probably be Album Wars. So Solo Artist Album Wars. So what this basically is, what the concept of this is that he's picked 32 solo artists that were in notable progressive rock bands or in other progressive rock bands. So the bands were all progressive and these artists all played in them. That's basically in the way I see it. And you know, some of these albums, in fact, probably a fair number of them are actually progressive themselves, but some of them are not. But that's okay because they played in progressive rock bands. So that's what we're doing this month. We're going to have these 32 solo artists who played in these progressive rock bands do their solo album here and compare them to each other, basically. And I got to pick one. That's my task. His task was much harder than mine. Mine is I just got to listen to them and pick one. So the first one that we're going to do, or day one if you prefer, is between David Gilmour's debut album, which came out in 1978, and Steve Hillage's Fish Rising, which came out in 1975. So I've listened to both these albums. In fact, the Steve Hillage one I've probably listened to based on, I think it was in a different battle that I did not too long ago either. It might have been in the Great Prog War. I would have to go back and look, but I'm sure somebody will make a mention if that's where it was. And I had listened to it a few times then, and I've listened to it again. It's not a bad album. So anyways, I listened to both albums, and the thing I like about Ben is that there's always a commonality in his battles. So he'll pick 16 battles, his first 16. It doesn't really translate that far into the future, but usually in the first round, it's he tends to put up albums that have some commonality between them. Not just in this case that they're progressive or anything like that, but something about the album that the two albums have something similar about them. In this case, I think it's the guitar. I think this one was the guitar. So you have two really strong guitar players here. Very different styles, of course. Gilmour's more melodic, soulful, I might add, some real kind of emotional guitar playing, where Steve Hillage is kind of really almost metal-like in some ways, but it's just, he pushes the limits of guitar ability here on some of these tracks. So yeah, so I think it's the guitar that is the commonality between these two albums. So I did listen to the Gilmour album. This is the first time I listened to it. It had some good tracks on it, I might say. Of course, I love his voice, and his guitar playing is really good on the album. I just found, listening to his album, I didn't really find any of the tracks really memorable. Nothing stood out. I listened to the whole album, and I couldn't think of anything that really stood out for me on the album. And, you know, maybe it might be one of those albums that doesn't hit it off with me right away, and you know, maybe it'll come up again sometime and I'll listen to it a little more, and then all of a sudden, you know, one song will stick and then more songs will stick, and you know, this has happened many times over the history of my music indulgence, I guess, if you want to call it. But for this first time listening through it, I just didn't find anything that memorable. The only thing about it is his voice. Unfortunately for him, he has such a great voice, but it just reminds me of Pink Floyd, and there's nothing can be said about that, or you can't undo it. However, when you're listening to it, with his voice, there's kind of an automatic kind of comparing it to Pink Floyd albums, and I have to say this falls fairly short in a lot of areas to a Pink Floyd album. It doesn't have that all those quirky noises that Floyd's capable of doing. The lyrics aren't nearly as good as you might find on a Floyd album. You don't have those really deep kind of keyboard parts that you get from Rick Wright. You don't find that on here. And it just isn't as memorable as a Pink Floyd, but it has Pink Floyd voice on it. So unfortunately for David Gilmour, it's not his fault that he sounds like Pink Floyd, because he is Pink Floyd in a lot of ways. It's just unfortunate that the studio album just doesn't have all the other elements that go with Floyd. So, and you're going to find that this is going to be an issue with a lot of these solo artists, is that they come from bands that I love, and they just don't cut the mustard on their own the way it does with the band. That's for me just the way it's always been. This album, though, is not bad. I passed it. I would have given it a pass. I just found it not all that memorable. The other album, Steve Hillage, he's not burdened with having sound like Gong, which is the band he's from. This is his 75 album, Fish Rising. Some fantastic guitar playing on this, just absolutely great. There's some really good tracks here. Again, not as memorable, but then again, it's much more progressive than the David Gilmour album, and it's much harder for me to penetrate progressive albums. They take longer. I tend to push myself with them because I know that the rewards of them are usually much greater than that first listen. And so I do like this album. I think it's an album that I liked a little bit more this time than the last time I listened to it. If there's a negative with this album, it's the album cover. I don't see the point in, and I know the album's called Fish Rising. It's just not a great album cover. I just find it kind of dumb, actually. And that's the best way I can say it. Fortunately, the music is much better than the album cover. I'm not really sure why he chose this as a concept, but he did. And I like his guitar playing. I like the music on this. It's quite a bit better than the Gilmour album, I think. So really, to me, it really wasn't much of a competition between the two. Steve Hillage is going to win this battle fairly easily and move on to the next round. But it's an album that I'm not sure how far it'll go. It'll depend on who it's up against and stuff like that in the next round. But I think it won this one fairly easily. So there you have it. That's the opening shot for Solo Artist Album Wars, which is what we're going to call this. I was going to call it, tried to get the prog word in there somewhere, but then I began to realize a lot of these albums aren't really that proggy anyways. But the explanation should be good enough. So if you have any comments about either of the two albums, about my opinions about the albums, about your opinions about the albums, about the artists that are on the albums, you can put that in the comment section below. I will try to answer anything that's put to me. I do ask that you don't kind of call me a moron or an idiot or anything like that. It's not that I'm overly sensitive. I'm not. When somebody calls me a moron or an idiot, I'm not really inclined to answer them. I think you can probably understand that. So anyways, please hit the like and subscription button. It's much appreciated. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the content of this series. This series will go by faster than I think because it's Christmas time. I have a little more time at this time of year than normally. So so I thank Ben for this first album challenge, an interesting one. I know that he will pick some stuff that will be very interesting as we go along. So I hope to see you tomorrow for day 2 of those solo artist album wars. I'll get it. You watch. I'll get it before the end. We'll be saying it with no problem. Have yourself a good night. Take care. Goodbye.